So I'd like to say good afternoon to our Inspire Alsis radio listeners. You are on the Inspire exclusive with Nadia-Toni Jacobs and me, Ilhaam Hoosain, and we have a special guest with us this week. This week's topic is GBV because 16 Days of Activism is coming up, and that will be in the by the end of November the 25th, and it ends on the 10th of December. So 16 days of activism, protection of children and women and children. So if we can get some introduction, Aleya, if you can just introduce yourself and explain to us like what you do in our community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ilham. Thank you, Nadia and Ilham, for having me here. My name is Aleya Ramparsad Banwari. I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm an activist. I'm a GBV survivor. And I'm someone who's I'm also a queer person. So I'm very passionate about supporting and protecting human rights and advocating for the communities that we come from. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining us. So Nadia, if we can start with you, can you define gender-based violence for somebody that doesn't understand what it is?
Okay, so gender-based violence is basically it's quite a broad spectrum, so to say, as well, because one of the biggest aspects is that there's the physical part of it, the emotional part of it, um, and the mental part of it as well. But it's basically any act of violence on or against a woman or girl child and different communities, for example, targeting a gay community or a gay person in general. So GBV is it's the use of an abuser using power over the victim in any way that they deem necessary.
Mm. Aleya, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, 100%. Thank you for that, Nadia. It's generally it's harm that's directed at someone, usually because of their gender identity, their expression, or
Mm,
a perceived role. It's about power and control and systematic devaluation of people, often who are not cisgender men. And it can take so many different forms. It can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be sexual, it can be economic, it could be spiritual or
mm,
cultural. And I think it's so
mm,
important in South Africa because our rate of femicide is 6 times higher than the national global average. So it means
yeah,
that 10 women are killed every single day by men. And these are not like monsters out in the community. These are people's partners. It's their boyfriends, it's their husbands, it's their fathers, it's their friends. So it's such
yeah.
in design thinking or like the consulting world, it's called a wicked problem because it intersects with so many other very complex issues that we sit with in South Africa, like poverty and inequality. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
You
Uh,
know, I would just like to also say that uh, in South Africa, our crime stats currently between 24 to 25 is murder, 961 women, 273 children were murdered,
Mm.
um, equating to approximately 10 women and 3 children killed every day. Attempted murder, 1.567 were victims. Assault, GBV, 14.366 women assaulted to inflict grievous bodily harm. Rape, 10.191 cases reporting. Of these, 43% of women has domestic partners. And the big thing that I find about this, and this is working with insights and working in my own field, is that the reports that come in is your stats, becomes the stats in the country. However, I question the reports that does not come in.
Yeah.
mm.
What happens to those people, you know?
Yeah, so I feel like the
Yeah.
stats
No,
could be
I
higher
just
than what we thought it could be. And I just want to also say something about like the violence within our communities, like one-on-one violence and in a family setting. I think it is a lot about
Yeah.
our morals and values and ethics. Because if our stats are
Mm.
like the highest in the world, then it really has to do with how our children are being raised and how we treat each other in communities on the grassroots level. Because these stats are impossible to kind of monitor, especially with undocumented cases. So,
Yeah.
like what you're saying, Nadia, is that the stats could be higher because there's a lot of people who live in
Yes.
fear in this country because they know either the police is not going to help them or they're going to make it difficult or they're going to be targeted. And I mean, our justice system that you always talk about really needs to be looked into and maybe broken
Yeah.
down and then rebuilt from the bottom up, like from a good foundation. But yes, Aaliyah, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that, Ilham. I want to expand on both of your points. I think that as we know in South Africa, we have great legislation that is there to protect people, but it's the implementation of those laws. Like, our laws are they're very progressive, and we've got things like the Domestic Violence Amendment Act of 2021. We've got the Criminal Law Sexual Offences Amendment Act. And we've got the National Council on GBF. Um, but when it comes to and going back to those numbers from SAPS, it's like though that's only like the tip of the iceberg. There are so many women or there are people who are survivors who don't go and report these crimes, and it's from
Absolutely.
it doesn't make sense because you like often you're a survivor, you've been assaulted or you've experienced violence, and then you go to the police and then they don't take you seriously. They're like, no, you're lying, or it's kind of culturally assumed like because you're a wife or a woman, it's culturally acceptable for your male partner to be violent with you, because that's his
Mm.
his right. And often it's like what's the first thing you put in place? It's a restraining order, and it's very easy to violate that restraining order. So the 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 pertinence or the importance is literally put on the victim to kind of like solve this issue. So there's no support structures around them.
That is
Yeah.
a very good
Yeah.
point. The support structures,
Yeah.
because and there's some places like
Yeah.
it's so few and far in between that does give proper support. But I mean, the rest of the ladies in this country, and I'm not saying men don't get abused, but it's majority women, there isn't
Mm.
enough support and like tangible support where
Mm.
it's like day to day. It's like maybe you can go there once or go sleep at the shelter once and then they put you out because you can't stay there anymore. And then what happens to you? There isn't a
Yeah.
structural support for long-term people or citizens of this country to feel safe because
Hmm.
if you have to go back to your abuse, and that happens a lot because most women have children with these abuses, then where
Hmm.
must they go?
Yeah.
They can't sleep on the street with their child, and then they end up back in the same position. So that is definitely something that we need to look into is how to give
Mm.
full-time support to citizens of this country if they're in an abusive relationship,
Mm.
that they never have to go back. But Nadia, let
Yeah.
us get into the signs of how do you look, what signs do you look for and recognize that you are in a power struggle with somebody, like that somebody has this type of power over you. What are the red flags?
Look, the red flags are often, and this also comes in with regards to generational abuse as well, and how that manifests as well. Um, what are the red flags for, let's say, a woman, male and female partners? So you start with a smack.
Mm.
Okay, so you get a smack. He's been drinking all weekend. You get a smack, and by Monday morning, he is super sorry. He buys you your favorite flowers, and he says, "You know what? That's not me. You know it's not me. That's the alcohol speaking." Okay, and it starts escalating from there. So now he knows he's gotten away with it, right? And it starts escalating from there. Now you may have an abuser that's a narcissist, for example. They have no remorse. A narcissist does not have any remorse, and they will use anything to um, to manipulate their partners. Um, then the next thing you'll find happening is the insults will come, the body shaming will come. Those are all little red flags. If you can tick off at least 7 things that they are doing as men, holding power over a woman, then you got a problem. Then you're sitting with a problem. And also, if you the if you a friend of somebody at work, for example, and you're noticing they're coming in with bruises or red marks around the necks, maybe a broken finger, and no, you know what, I fell. And this happens systematically, ongoing, and creating different patterns, where they've noticed, your friend has now noticed over the last 3 months, literally every week you're coming to work with something, then it's time to act, you know, and sit that woman down. Now, here's the difficult part, Ilham. The difficult part is when somebody comes in and says, listen, I think I know what's happening with you. Do you need a friend? Do you need to talk? Um, the first thing that female does is speak up for the partner, okay? Because he has manipulated her into thinking that what he is doing is love and he won't do it again. It's just the same behavior constantly over. So it's the perpetual lies, it's the patterns, it's neatly wrapped up in a little box of narcissism. There might even be psychopathic tendencies, but the main thing is to so that that male holds power over you. Isolation, controlling wherever you're going. When you are going out, who are you with? What time are you coming home? Um, I know of a few women that basically would need to get undressed and you would check underwear. All of these type of things, those are red flags. I mean, who would do something like that?
But
Yeah.
Nadia, narcissists are very close to psychopaths because once you stop caring about things or the consequences of somebody else, and you kind of not classified as a human because we don't care about the
Yes.
next person. So they are very close to psychopaths. But Aleya, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you,
Mhm.
through your activism, what are some of the things that you've seen on the outside world and people that you've come into contact with? What are some of the signs that they can look out for? And like, what can they do? Because you now in that world of activism, so you know like who to go to, where to go to. Like, can you give us some details of what they can do when they're in that situation?
Sure. So just to piggyback on what Nadia was saying, I really appreciate her speaking about the manipulation that happens with abusers, and it's almost like this love bombing, like he hurt
Mm,
me once and now he's made up for it. So it will like showering you with gifts and love and affection, and
yeah.
you're like, he made a mistake. And also, as women, we're socialized to be like, I can fix this person. If I
Mm.
love them and I show up for them enough, like I can make this better. So it's that mentality that's also changing. Um, I think there's a lot of we have several like hotlines and support services which are free and
Mm,
confidential that people can reach out to. So there's the GBV Command Center. The toll-free line is 0800 428 428. You've also got the SMS hotline. There is the police, which is 10 111. There's Lifeline. But there are also some very cool organizations who are doing great things, like Women for Change
yeah.
SA. You've
Mm,
got the Triangle Project in Cape Town, you've got Rape
mm,
Crisis, and you've got amazing platforms with women like you, Nadia and Ilham. I think it's very much about reaching out to other organizations and
mm,
survivors, just because, as we know, going to the police may not always get what we need to happen. But I also want to
Yeah.
highlight that we do have the Women for Change, and a lot of activist organizations across the country are currently planning a national women's shutdown on the 21st of November,
Mm.
2025, to align with what's happening at the G20. So they're calling on all women and allies to be like no work, no school, no unpaid labor, and trying to show the country, like, withdraw our power to show the country this is what it will look like without us. Women for Change is also having a Women in Festival at Newlands Cricket Ground on the 13th and 14th of November. So they're going to be having classes on self-defense and legal clinics, wellness zones. And they are currently, Women for Change are currently doing a traveling showcase called the Unburied Casket. And it's built, they're trying to show how many women were murdered just last year alone. And I think their hashtag around at the moment is Unbury the Truth to
Mm.
highlight
Alea, I
this
just want
national
to ask you
crisis.
also, where do you think this violence stems from? This violent behavior?
It's such a complicated issue. I mean, it's
Mm.
like we've always had these unequal power dynamics between men and women from the very get-go of, like, men are protectors and the in charge of the household, but there are lots of other systemic factors to take into place, like colonialism. And as Nadia mentioned before, we have huge problems with alcohol and substance abuse in our country, and that's partly because I think men themselves feel powerless, and so for them to
Mm.
kind of gain their power back, it's like, who can I dominate, to
Yeah.
for me to feel like a man.
Mm.
Yeah. I fully agree there because it's all about the power. And, I think the biggest question for me as a counselor is when I sit with a case and I sit with a mother that possibly has about 4 or 5 children from this man, I sit with her and I ask her one question: What do you want? What do you want to be, or what is it that you seek? And the most common thing is they're going to tell you either it's freedom or peace.
Mm.
They don't want this abuse anymore. But what they don't realize is that only they can make that change. And so the fear is such a huge part of it, that when your partner holds that amount of power over you, you feel minute in it. So you don't see that you can accomplish all the bigger things and the better things because you feel that little, you know. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm. Nadia, what are some of the most common forms that GBV can manifest?
It's if we look at the most common forms, it's physical, emotional, and sexual. So with physical, it highlights a whole lot of things: biting, kicking, burning, killing cigarettes on the person's body. In my case, when I went through torture with um, an ex-partner, he threw food all over me, over my body. Um, so there's a lot damaging your personal property. You got a gift, he takes it and he smashes it, because he, only he can have that control over you. The emotional struggle would be the insults, the extreme jealousy,
And disguising insults
um,
as jokes.
isolating you. That's it. That's it. Um, and in general, intimidation and manipulation. The sexual part of all of this is forcing you to have sex. A lot of women are not, and they don't understand what it is if they do not consent, because they have been taught that it's okay for the partner to have sex with the female partner, um, even though she doesn't want to. And they don't realize that is actually rape. You can, because you haven't consented. it needs to be both parties in it. And then I had a case, obviously cannot mention much about it, but I had a situation of a 12-year-old child that was involved with a gangster. He got onto alcohol, he got onto drugs, and he groomed her for about 3 months. He groomed her. And when he had her in his clutches, he got his whole gang. She was passed on from one person to the other and forced to have sex with him. Otherwise, she would not have been able to leave that house that night. And so these are the things that they do, which impacts on victims and survivors for the rest of their lives, you
Mm,
know. But there is healing, there is the better part of it.
Mm. But
mm,
just to build on that, Nadia, it's such a lifelong like struggle, and thank you for sharing that story about
Absolutely.
that little girl. My GBV story also happened when the first one happened when I was quite young, and I think it when you are exposed to rape and harm in that way so early on, it really changes the way you view and receive love and intimacy. And so it's like you associate like I can only be loved if I this person loves me physically. So if like there's no physical
Yeah,
intimacy, there's no love, or it's like I have
yeah.
to be physically intimate in order to receive love or for this person to show that they love me. So it's like
mm,
it really
Mm,
warps your mind.
mm,
And then you don't know how to trust people, you're always on guard. And it prevents you from having a secure attachment in any ways, and not just in your romantic relationships, but your friendships
absolutely.
or possibly relationships with your parents and your children
Mm,
and so forth and so forth.
mm,
mm,
Oh, just to also add, it's not also, I wanted to speak about like the impact of like social media, especially with lots of young people. Gender-based violence can take on the form of like sharing photos and videos of young people
mm.
or in compromising positions on the internet. And once it's on
Yeah,
there, it exists there forever. So, I mean, it's caused such levels of um, suicide and like bad
mm,
mental health in young people because it's like I
yeah,
like how do you step back from that? Like it's out there and now everyone knows this
yeah,
about me.
mm.
yeah.
I think
Wow.
we also have within our education system too many children in one classroom. I think that is also a big problem in our society because
Mm,
I understand that children have to be social, but collective thinking can be a very negative thing because that is where bullying starts. That is when
mm,
children learn how to be in different camps and they don't stop, like they don't become emotionally mature because a lot of children in Elsie's River are stunted. Like they become adults,
mm,
but they have the mindset of a child where they are still bullying and then they become parents. And so the cycle
mm,
continues, and sometimes it escalates because they're frustrated with the situation, they don't have enough money, whatever the economic status is, and so they don't,
mm,
in that capacity, better themselves or skill themselves up because they stuck in a certain mentality. I mean, if you look at grown men in Elsie's River, I'm generalizing now. A lot of them are in their 30s or in their 40s, and but they still have the mentality of a 16-year-old. And especially when they're in a
mm,
group, and especially when they're in a group of men. When they're sitting on the
mm,
yard and they're drinking, and there's like five, six, seven, 10 of them, and like we all their neighbors, and we can hear what they're talking about, how they talk about each other, how they talk about women, how they
mm.
talk about situations. So it really is a emotional stunted development, and that is something we need
Yeah,
to focus on. And that is why, like, I'm so happy that I have Nadia here because Nadia is based in a primary school, and I think a social worker or a holistic healer should be in every school, if not two of you
yeah,
in every school,
absolutely.
just to monitor
Mm,
children's emotional development and to stop them
yeah,
from becoming perpetrators. because who wants such a
yeah,
future? Because you such a maybe a good child, and you think you'd never do something like that, and then you end up being the abuser. And it starts
yeah.
at school, and it obviously starts at home. But there's so many cases going on in Cape Town now. I don't know if you heard about that Milnerton case, about the bullying case. And
Mm,
so
Oh, yes.
these things are happening, and it's affecting children. Like, in the next question is about how does GBV affect you individually long term? And it is psychological. It is mostly psychological, I think, and then it manifests into physical problems, either long-term chronic
Mm,
diseases, or you get like unwanted pregnancies and diseases. But not if you can
yes,
expand on that. We only have about 10 minutes left, but if you can just
yes.
expand on like
Okay.
how does it work from your mind, and how to get to a place of healing also.
So I think the biggest aspect is, I think for most victims or survivors of GBV, they probably, in all probability, not everybody, but in all probability, they will go through PTSD. That's uh, uh, post-traumatic
Post-traumatic
stress
stress syndrome.
disorder. Yes, things like anxiety disorder, suicidal tendency, either suicidal thoughts, which leads to tendencies. Sometimes, in a lot of occasions, it has led to death at the hands of the perpetrator. Severe depression, going from a lighter depression, not doing anything about it, and then going into escalating into severe depression, educational delays with studies, STIs, HIV, AIDS. There is a long list. I think if I were to advise anybody, it would need to start with your emotional self, because we have an emotional mind and we have a factual mind, right? And so when we make decisions, should be a wise decision. But because our body and our minds has been so focused on the power that the person's taken over us, we keep pushing it aside and say, "Ah, no, I'm imagining myself." Um, and then, you'll have a situation where it's a child of 13 years old and she doesn't know how to express it. And that could
yeah,
possibly lead to self-mutilation. So all of that starts in the emotional aspect of things. And then remember, Ilham, when somebody cuts you, it's on the outside. Um, you'll have a scar there, but it eventually heals. Having a scar on the inside works a lot more differently. And wanting to go on the healing journey is the best thing you can do for yourself. But you have to take
yeah.
the first step. You
Alaya?
have to be able to say,
Yeah, no, thank
um,
thank thank you for that, Nadia. I just wanted to touch on it like 100%. Like it happens to you physically, but like the scars last for so long. But just to add a little bit more perspective from a public health point of view, um,
mm,
rape and violence that happens to us doesn't just last in this lifetime. There's
yeah,
um a word called epigenetics, but it's looking at like the exposure of the environment and but also things that happened to your grandmother or great grandmother while your
mm,
mother or grandmother was in her womb. So if your grandmother experienced rape and violence, like that lives through your body, and that's what leads
yeah,
to the manifestation of other chronic illnesses, including like
mm,
diabetes and heart disease,
yeah,
um, fibromyalgia, as we know,
yeah,
things like that. I know we don't have much time left, and I'd love to ask, like, we're heading into the festive season, and this is when
mm.
the rates of GBV and violence spike. Nadia and Ilham, what tips or do you think we can like share with the community going into festive season and knowing that people are going to be celebrating, they're going to be drinking a lot more, and all of our support services are either going to be closed down or at capacity?
Mm,
I think the first thing one needs to understand is your rights. That's the very first thing you need to understand. And if you are going through this, get yourself a support system. Let the support system not be family or friends. Let it be a platform where he's not able to hold power over. That's not scared of him, you know. And uh, um, if it is a generational abuse and the cycle is continuing to grow, then you also need to ask yourself, how do I break that cycle? Because somewhere you need to make a start, you know. And what do I want out of it? Is it power that I want? Is it freedom, emotional freedom? Is it emotional health? Is it, finding out exactly what it is that you need and then and then taking the step. It doesn't have to be through the justice system. There are other organizations that will gladly assist, you know. So familiarize yourself with the different acts and the different organizations. There is help out there,
Mm-hmm.
but the client themselves, they need to ask for that help. And I think that is the crucial factor.
mm,
But I'm open on in December. I avail myself for any emergencies. So yeah, I'm the 100%. If you don't have somebody to, speak to me.
mm.
I don't mind.
I feel like during the festive season, because a lot of places close down and the children at home, because now they're at home because there's no school, so there's a lot of irritation that happens because you're not with your child or with your partner all day every day, and now you're kind of on leave, and maybe the factories are closed down and your child is at home, and that is where I think emotional intelligence comes in. I think we really need to focus on this in the country, in South Africa, and especially Cape Town. We need to
Yeah.
focus on emotional intelligence and being aware of what we are feeling and how what we do affects people around us. I think that really needs to be a focus as a foundation because people just do and say
Mm.
whatever they please without consequence
Yes.
also,
Yeah.
and there needs to be consequences because we have all these laws like you were saying earlier, but it's not implemented. Like they know they can get away with it unless they do something really really bad, but like
Yes.
in between they
Yeah.
can smack you, in between they can kick you, in between they can abuse you, they
Mm.
can steal your money, they can like they can ruin your career just for them to control you.
Mm.
So like I really feel like there
Yeah.
are organizations, international organizations that have branches in Cape Town. If we can
Mm.
get our people to go to training programs, like I feel like
Mm.
there should be like some kind of mandatory, like to eradicate this because it is an epidemic in
Mm.
South Africa. It is a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, almost 10, like you were saying, the stats say 10 women a day get murdered. If that was men being
Mm.
murdered, then things would change very quickly. So like, why is it
It
acceptable
would be
for
a national state of
yeah,
disaster.
then they would change, like
Yeah.
they would be very upset if they were being killed.
Yeah.
Mm.
But like
Yeah.
we are
Yes.
dying on a daily, raped and dying and brutalized, and
Yeah.
our children are being murdered. Like it, why is it not a priority when it's not happening to their gender? So I think we need to also hold accountability. And I think also over the festive season,
Mm.
please find a safe place. And once you find a
Yeah.
safe place or a safe
Yeah.
person that is your safety, build a network.
Yeah.
That is the only way you're
Mm.
also gonna build a life away from this
Yes.
person. Because it's easy to say, oh, just leave. If you have nothing to go to, if you have no one to support you, if
Yeah.
you don't have a place to live, you don't have finances because they cut you off all the
Yes.
money and they're trying to control every aspect of your life, how do you do that? And don't tell them. Don't
Yeah.
tell
And
them. Sort yourself out first.
also, Ilham,
And like that is my thing that I just feel like emotional intelligence training should be mandatory, especially with mothers, young mothers,
mm,
and just
mm,
find a safe person and build a life outside of that person in a safety network, and then you can eventually leave.
mm. Also, Ilham, I just want to add before we leave quickly, build yourself, get a journal, okay? hide it under bricks if you have to, and start a monitoring system. It's called monitoring and evaluation. So every
Mm.
time he sees something wrong, every time he abuses you, every time you've been to
Yes,
sex,
document it.
every time somebody closed, document everything. And
Yeah.
so when the time comes, when somebody says, no, but you weren't there at such a time, so how could I have done that? Here it is. Here's the proof.
Exactly.
Right?
Nadia, this
Do
is like we
that
have the last 30 seconds.
yourself.
Thank you so much to our guest, Aleya, for joining us on Inspire exclusive with Nadia-Toni Jacobs and me, Ilhaam. Thank you so much for your time. We must definitely have you back so we can expand on this topic